Hello and welcome to Jump Advisory. Welcome to our new series of webinars all about business development. And I think as people start to sort of load in and come into the webinars, again, it's a very busy webinar. So if you've got the opportunity just to drop a quick note into the chat bar to say that you can hear me, that'd be great. But we've been talking about the importance of being customer centric now for really some time. But until your clients really feel the value, they will still shop around for a better deal. And I think at the moment in time, we've got a great opportunity to take market share from competitors out there by doing the right thing. But the lack of a business strategy to connect you to your market is generally a flaw in what I find in most agencies. So having your sales operation, your service operation, your market capture process will give you a 360 sort of view of your customer base. And now that it's relevant that we start to personalize that engagement to make sure that we are being a differentiator to our businesses, to give you an opportunity to steal market share is really important. So investing in actually growing and developing an actual new business strategy to put your customers right in the center of that strategy is really important. So the question that we're asking all the time is, does your strategy really do that? Is your strategy actually moving forward? So in the first webinar, what we're going to cover is devising a dynamic and effective business development strategy. So how to plan, compile your business development strategy that will disrupt your marketplace. And I think there's a great opportunity to be really disruptive in the marketplace and inspire and enthuse your team to actually be part of that disruption. So as you can see today, I'm joined by Dave and Paul. Paul Jacobs isn't here today. He's on client site. I was speaking to him early this morning and he was waxing lyrical about his journey on whatever motorway he was on and how he was stuck from there and just babbling away as he usually was. I put him on hold for about 45 minutes and I didn't speak a word, but that's nothing new there from that point of view. So let's get into this, guys. And of
course, H, don't forget that Paul has taken on his new job as job uncle.
Yeah, well, yes, job uncle. Yeah, for horse and hound, indeed. So if you have any questions for job uncle, feel free to drop him an email at jumpadvisory.com, and I'm sure he will answer that as job uncle. But let's talk about really now devising that dynamic, effective business strategy. And we had this real long conversation when we started to plan this webinar, and it was really interesting. We should have really recorded this webinar because what we actually talked about there, would have actually sufficed. Let's start at the beginning, guys. So let's open it up to you guys. I'm just going to open it up as a general chat rather than sort of a Q&A session. When we started to build big teams, certainly in times of downturn, where did you start? What did you look at?
I think for me, Howard, I think that the starting point, and we keep saying this, but understanding what the vision is for the business is really important, because when you're setting out your sales strategy, it's got to play a part in helping you get to that vision. So if your vision in 3 years' time is to take your business from £1 million worth of EBIT to 3, those are just numbers that I'm rattling off, by the way, then your sales strategy has got to underpin your vision. And then getting into the detail, it's about understanding what are the, what is the unique elements of your sales strategy that's going to come to life? What is it you're going to sell? What are the markets? What are the products? What are the services? Understanding whether those are realistic, understanding the market conditions, whether you're fighting against the tide or you're going with the tide. But it all comes back to me to making sure your sales strategy supports the vision and your sales strategy is broken down by individual so everybody equally understands their part in delivering the sales strategy that underpins the vision. I don't know whether you'd agree, Dave.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've spent the last, 8 weeks, I've probably done what we call a jump forward plan. So I've sat with the chief executives and founders of 8 of our clients and have done a plan with them. And it's interesting how many of them, their vision has changed during the pandemic. The way they want to approach the market, the way they want to understand what's happening with their customers has changed. And I just want to make sure that everybody knows that's okay. If you were holding on to something that you said 2 years ago, we're going to go in this direction and we're going to do that and we're going to achieve that, and yet because of what's happened, because the times have been more challenging, that vision has had to change, that's okay. But whatever it is now, make sure you have a vision. Make sure it is earthed, it is rooted, make sure that your staff know what it is, because without it, your business strategy isn't going to work. And I think a very simple message for me is you've got to know what you want to do as you go forward. And for some of you listening to this now, maybe thinking, I just want to get through Christmas. I just want to get through lockdown. I just want to see what we come out the other end at Easter, whatever time that is, and go from then. But now's a good time to look at that, to look at your vision and say, actually, what if I had my vision nailed right now and put my business strategy on top of that? What can I do in the next 6 months, 3 to 6 months, that could really accelerate my business?
So it's quite interesting when you sort that. I've just put the first sort of slide up of the 5 key phases that we want to sort of as a journey to take our clients on, that, you know, how they contact their marketplace. My original first slide was just do it, but do it with vigor, which was from the head of Nike and what Nike do it. And I think if you're going to wait until Christmas to sort of do it in the new year, then you're behind the scale. And I always think at this time of year, when I was a sales consultant and then as a team leader, then as a manager, I took this time of year to start to pull together a business strategy. And the first place I looked at, although I want to be in line with my vision, I want to be in line with my marketplace of what I'm trying to sell out there and what I'm doing with that, was I wanted to make sure that my team and my people were with me that understood that. So I wanted to make sure that my consultants understood their process, how they were working inside that process and what they were focusing on. And what I found, like you, Dave, I've done probably 6 or 7 now jump forward plans with our clients. And what I found is that their vision was not aligned now with their consultants and what their consultants were doing, because they hadn't actually connected with each other and how that was doing. Once they started to connect and both sides understood what the vision was and what that end goal was. Now we're talking about devising 3-year strategies, but what we then boil that down is to a 12-month strategy into 4 equal sprints. And it's that initial sprint that takes them away and starts to really develop where their business goes. And it's understanding that. And that's where you need to have your team fully immersed within that sprint and understand what the goals are and what you're trying to achieve. And with any strategy, when you start to put those strategies forward, I think it's important that your team are part of the creation of that strategy and the development of that strategy, so they buy into it and there's ownership from there.
Yeah, 100%. I see you've. If I could just explain about the slide in a little bit more detail, Howard.
Yeah.
I think we're going to probably flick around a little bit, so apologies, but I think this slide's a really important slide for me. So this is the 5 stages of a relationship with a client, and ultimately we're trying to get every client to a trusted advisor level type relationship. Don't get me wrong, we love the loyalty and the advocacy there as well, but it starts with that contact bit. And the contact bit, as we all know, is about hybrid mixture of different sales activities. I think for me, what I always advise people around is when you're initially making that contact, you have no relationship, and the best way to make contact is to give some data or information that is very objective and it's informative and it's of value. So, if somebody sent me some information and it was market leading, I thought, oh, wow, I need to read this document, or it's got some data in there that's going to make me look better internally because I know my market better, or the skills or the areas of specialism that I'm recruiting for. Then it's about trying to use that data to get beyond the contact phase and into the acceptance phase. And if you're in the contact phase, you have no power. You have no, say in the relationship. You're on the back foot. It's all about trying to get to an even point where you can have a relationship where you can demonstrate your consultative element and skills, but using that data from the onset. And if people listening are members of the RAC, there's some brilliant data coming out from the RAC. EMSI is another really great source of data. People like Broadbean and Wave Tracker, you can get really good market information and data to give your clients, to tell them what's going on from a labour market, skills perspective, but also just what's happening around thought leadership as well. It's a brilliant way to get beyond the contact stage.
See, data is really important, I think, Dave. And I was going to say, just before you jump in there, I think data is really important. And I was with a client yesterday, and the amount of data that they have coming into their business is huge, but it's how you use that data and what you do to use that data. And if you start to add your data to data such as what the REC are churning out at the moment, then all of a sudden you get a national view, a localized view, and then you get a personalized view of what you can do with that data. And I think a lot of agencies don't understand the capability of their CRM and the data it holds, and therefore what they tend to do is struggle to sort of understand what data they should be putting out. Where if you use a product in with one of our partners is North Star, and that extracts data and can give you all sorts of different data for from your CRM to help market to your client base. Dave, you were going to say something, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, we're still in a pandemic, and one of the things that has given us is time. We are working, many people working from home, some of them clearly working in the office, but we all have a bit more time. We're commuting less. We are engaging on client journeys less. A lot of our work is by Zoom. And that's where you can collect the data. And I think one of the key messages that I would say is that our role is to update our clients, not to inundate them. It's not to inundate them with a load of information. It's to update them about what is going on. And not just what is going on in recruitment with trends with regard to the roles and the salaries and who's been placed where, but also what's going on in their sector. Are your consultants linked in to some of the research development opportunities within their own sector, whether it's fintech or building services or education? Can they then read that data and present it back to the client with your brand on there and with where they got that source material from? So there's a lot of data that's out there. And to Paul's point about contact, that's how you make that contact. It doesn't feel like it's then a really hard sell. It doesn't feel like business development, but of course it is business development because you are connecting with those contacts and you are offering something free, which is of value. And that's the skill, I think, of business development in a time of crisis where everybody is, unsure as to whether they want to make a cold call or get meetings. Start offering something that's of value. And you'll find that you're going to get a lot better and a much warmer reception.
And just to give a couple of examples of that for me, Dave, I've sent clients data on, .NET developers in Milton Keynes in terms of the salaries, the breakdown of the gender split, where .NET developers come from in terms of universities, which employers are recruiting for .NET developers in Milton Keynes in the area, top employers, people that we're recruiting, churn rates in terms of where companies attract talent from and lose talent to. And you might think, wow, why would you do all that? Well, I always use it and ask one question, and that is, Mr. Client, if you find the data useful and you can't fill the role, all I ask is that you give me a shout and let me try and fill it for you after you've used this data to try and help. So I'm giving a gift. I'm giving information, very market brilliant information to try and help you out there. And I think the second thing for me is that data is also really useful for service reviews, because everything that Dave's just articulated around competitor information, market information, all that you should be presenting back to your clients in service reviews. So if you haven't met your top 10 clients in the past 3 months or 6 months virtually, and you haven't sat down and presented market information, and we'll come on to ratio and performance data separately in a little bit, but you should absolutely be doing that. And if you haven't, then one of the tips I've been saying is get out there between now and the end of the Christmas, get that service review booked into your diary, and making sure that you're educating the client, your customer, about what's going on out there and how it's going to impact their resourcing needs in 2021.
Yeah.
So when we start to think about that, then the next sort of part, once we've sort of got, the vision, the mission of what we want to be doing with our business strategy, then it is about knowing your current client base and understanding your current client base. And again, sort of understanding your clients that are buying, clients that have lapsed, understanding clients that you've worked with but have never made a placement with or made a minimal placement with, and then start to looking at that new client marketplace. And what we'll suddenly find is that it's a lot easier to make money out of clients that we already have or already know us than it is to open up new clients. And again, it's that differentiation, as we said at the beginning, of what are you doing to your client that differentiates you from your marketplace. And if you can help them reduce their overall cost of recruitment, then all of a sudden you're adding true value. And that's when you start to move into that trusted advisor spot, moving towards the advocacy spot from there. So when we start to talk about knowing your client base, Dave, you've worked with some small agencies and big agencies just recently. Talk to me about how you've helped them develop their knowledge of their client base to help develop a strategy that says, this is what we need to be knowing from the client base, and this is what we need to be doing to make sure we leverage more of the recruitment spend to ourselves.
Well, I've asked the founders to get the consultants to imagine that the consultants are running their own little business. And I've asked the consultants to present to the founders of the business what's going on in their area. And Paul mentioned it earlier about your top 10 clients that you haven't seen. We've got about 35, 40, whatever it is, working days till Christmas. There is more than enough time to ask each of those top 10 clients that they will have. And if they've got 10, that's great, because if every consultant at every desk of every recruiter in the UK has got 10 clients, trust me, our sector will be fine. Because if they can get out and see those 10, just ping them a note and say, I'd like to talk to you. I've got something I want to share with you. And do role play with your boss, with your team leader, with your manager. Do it first so that he or she can see that the consultant understands what's going on in the market, and give her maybe a 5-minute, 10-minute presentation. It will lead to a conversation, and out of the conversation will come something. I can absolutely guarantee it may not lead to a requirement right now. And if you enter the conversation thinking, this is great, I've got to have a meeting with X, Y, Z from such and such a company because I know they're going to give me a requirement, don't look at it that way. Look at it the other way. I want to invest some time into that client. I want to tell him or her what's going on as to what I know, what's going on in my business, what's going on in the sector. And then as requirements come, I'm pretty confident that they will go back to that consultant or that company, because they will remember they gave some time, they gave some free advice, and they've rehearsed and practiced with their manager, with their boss. And then if you've got 5 consultants, you've got 5 mini business presentations, so you can understand whether the consultant knows what's going on. And if they don't, there's an opportunity to pick that up, and then it becomes a learning opportunity. And what better time to learn than where we are right now?
Yeah, 100%. And for me, Dave, just to emphasize that point, I'm working with a lady who runs a small agency in Lancashire, and she's been really courageous. She's going to visit either virtually or face to face 36 clients between this week and the end of this year. So it's sort of 6 clients a week. And that will be, a big chunk of their client base that she's physically met in a very, very short period of time. And it is about, the purpose is 2 things. It's kind of come and share with you, information about the market and what's going on and things you might need to be aware of for next year. But secondly, can I equally ask you for feedback about what we do well and what you'd like us to do better? 2 really simple questions in a really authentic, genuine way. And she hasn't, in the last week, because she's been at this now a week, she hasn't had any client say, I haven't got time to meet you. Every client so far has now said, absolutely, let's get a date booked in the diary. And she's making absolute massive inroads into that client base. So 100% get out there between now and the end of the year. I think Paul Dinsdale has just asked a question, Howard, just around, and I haven't seen Susie's, by the way, so maybe you want to pick Susie's up, just around examples of what I present. I'm more than happy to, talk anybody through how to put together a marketing sort of pitch, how to use data, and what to present. It's got to be very specific to your sector, by the way. So it's got to be, things that's aligned to what you're offering and selling. But I can absolutely do that if anybody wants to reach out to me. And I think I've mentioned this on calls in the past, that marketing approach has been absolutely central to everything I've done in the last 2 years around business development. And every client I've brought on board has been because in the early days, I was sharing information, and that relationship grew from acceptance into that trusted advisor level type relationship, which is what we all want.
I think when we start to look at that, sorry, Dave, I think when we start to look at that, what we've got to think about is that you look at your buying clients, your lapsed clients, and clients that you've worked with but maybe never placed with. They know your client, and as I love Susie's terminology there of squeezing the pip rather than the scattergun approach. And I think you're absolutely rightly that you need to grab your orange and give it a proper squeeze to understand what's actually happening. But it's this time of the year when you start to look at your buying clients, your lapsed clients, that you start to ask the what if question. And I think this was the biggest question that I learned to get a real understanding of my business was what if. So once my consultants came back to me with their plan and what they were doing and their knowledge, the question of what if would always come out then. And the question would be, what if that client stopped? What if this client doubled the amount of work that it's doing? What if this happened? And once you start covering the what if, what you start to find is the holes, and you start to find what's happening. So what happens if your top client stops billing? What if? And they're going, well, what if? What if it doesn't happen? And well, you hope it doesn't happen, but what if it does happen? What have you got in your locker to stop that erosion of your business? So what are you doing? So the what if questions becomes really interesting when you're starting to squeeze that pip. Then you start to flip on the outside of that and start to look at what your new business approach really should be. And I always think it's, when you start to look at the marketplace, you'll have your clients that you are dealing business with, then it starts to look at new clients, and everyone has that scattergun approach, etc. To me, it's very simple. Look at the markets that in recession are likely to grow. Look at the clients that are likely to be doing business. What do you know about that client, or what do you know about that sector? Who are you targeting? Who are you focusing? And drive into those sectors. Because once you start to get into the sectors that you know that are moving, then you find that you get momentum very, very quickly in there. And again, what you're going to find, you'll have agencies in there that aren't particularly doing a great deal for their clients. So they maybe want to be removed. Your opportunity to take market share. But also what you're finding is that you're not just focusing on clients that may be slower coming out of recession, that maybe not want to actually make it out of recession for whatever reason. You're focusing on those clients that are really moving forward. And I think I said this in 2008 and got an immediate slashing on LinkedIn as in its early days, as I wrote, there is no such thing as recession for recruiters. You're either a recruiter who can't find clients who are buying, or you're just a recruiter. And it was really interesting. I had all these recruiters coming back, my market's on its knees, blah, 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 my market's on its knees. And then all of a sudden I had recruiters coming going, well, I'm working in the same market and I'm absolutely making a fortune out of that market at the moment. I'm having my best year ever. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing completely different. So every sector will have clients that are buying and clients that are not. Part of your strategy is to identify which of those clients are actually buying that you're not currently dealing with. Dave, you were going to say, sorry.
I was just going to say, here's a little secret for just the 50 or however many people, 40 or so people on this call. The big agencies don't do this very well.
No, they do not.
I've worked in a big agency, 2 of them, and I've run a number of smaller agencies. And the smaller agencies have agility to move quickly. We could end this webinar at 11:45, and at 11:46, if you're sitting there now, you could get your consultants together on a Zoom call for 12 o'clock and start right now. The bigger agencies don't think like that. There will be individuals within the bigger agencies that do, but in terms of implementation, they can't do it. So there's a real opportunity in the next 40 or so days before Christmas, the next 3 months as we build into Easter, for you, if you're running a niche agency, and that could be, less than 40, 50 staff, to really take a march in some of the bigger ones while they're thinking, well, what do I do? And how do I navigate this? So get talking, get arranging those meetings, get your consultant aside, build that trust with them, and you've got a really good opportunity, even in a difficult time. And what I don't want to do is come across not acknowledging that some out there are having a really tough time. I know it because I speak to some, but you've still got a chance to make the most of it, and you've still got a chance to do that before Christmas.
As we talk about the big agencies, we said what big agencies tend to do in this marketplace, and this is a very true, having sort of been that big agency marketplace, is that they tend to focus now on their big clients, the clients that are going to give them volume work. And what they tend to do is then, as always, and I fought tooth and nail against this, and if you only want to have this conversation with me, it was quite an interesting conversation with one of the chiefs of Adecco and one of the HR as they walked in and drew a line and said, everybody below that line, you need to go fire. And I point blankly said no, which was quite an interesting comment to him. He wasn't used to people saying no, but I was typically Yorkshire and would say no straight to him. But it was, what happens is that they cut very, very quickly, and they cut too deep. Their big clients then come back and they can't then service their big client, but what they can't do is service all their little clients underneath that. And that's where you can start to take market share from the bigger players. And that's how the bigger players in 2008, 2009 lost an awful lot of market share to smaller agencies, because the people that rejected and they moved out of their business, a lot started up their little agencies and took that market share for exactly what Dave said, the agility of that marketplace, but also that personal touch. So it's important that you know your competition. It's important that we understand our competition. So not only are we looking at the bigger agencies, look at your smaller agencies. Look at the agencies that are around you. Look at who are doing well. Why are they doing well? Look at those that are struggling. Why are they struggling? Which clients do they service? Because if their clients that they service are struggling, maybe there's an opportunity, maybe not take business off that client now, but maybe in the long term as a strategy there is. Look at the clients that maybe not be struggling, but still servicing by an agency that is struggling. Can you then go in and take that client directly from under your competitor's nose and increase your market share? So therefore your 10 clients become 12, become 14, become 16, and having a focus on who is actually working the marketplace and who is not is really important. So I think knowing your competitors and who they deal with is the first really important thing. Secondly is, what are they providing to that agency, that client, and how do you as an agency outperform that? And I think it's important that we start to understand that, because you need to understand the potential that you have sat on your doorstep that you're not really making the most of, because we've maybe had that we maybe have that limiting beliefs that we can't get in, we can't compete with an Adecco, we can't compete with that agency for this reason and that reason. Well, you can compete. And I think I read a comment the other day, and I'm just trying to find it now. The comment was, think big and go for it. You will never be bigger than your thoughts, and you are capable of much further than your limitations, which are nothing more than past conditioning. And it really is about the past conditioning that you've had. Don't call that client. Well, someone might have told you that 3 or 4 years ago. Why not call that client? Why not get into that client and work with that? Have an idea of what you're going to do. So I think it's important that we get rid of those limiting beliefs when we start talking about client development, and really sort of gun ourselves, as Susie said there, squeeze the pip with regards to your current client base, but then have a very focused strategy on your new client base and who you've got in your line of sight on who you want to take on.
And if it helps, if it helps with it of the people listening, can I encourage you? Your clients and prospects want to hear from you. They want to know what's going on. They want the information that Paul was alluding to earlier. You may be thinking, they don't want to be bothered by the likes of me. Let me assure you that they do. And the one that makes the call ultimately will get the respect, will get the trust, and therefore will get the business.
I also want to have a quick sort of comment. An anonymous attendee has written and said, we find the rec data to be a little bit, out of date. Let me tell you, the rec data is month on month on month. They are tracking the data and they're tracking the job flow every single week. So their data is up to date as you can absolutely get. So yes, I'll probably agree that before lockdown, some of their data was maybe a little bit out of date, but at this moment in time, they are tracking that daily, weekly, monthly, and giving their data out as quickly as they can produce that data. So that data is very up to date.
Howard, what I would say, and you're absolutely right, by the way, I think there's two parts to the data. There's one part of the data which is looking back, and then the other part looking forward, which is more sort of research and development. The research and development will come from people like the staffing industry analysts, McKinsey, Deloitte, are three examples that I'm sort of rattling off on the top of my head. So we've been asked again just about what would you present. I've just quickly broken it down in terms of how I would do this, but again, it's got to be aimed at your target audience. So for me, it would be about their employer confidence and outlook, the labour market, skills availability, what's happening to the workforce over the next 5 years. So this is taking data that's historical and now starting to look forward. What's happening around IR35, what are your competitors doing, what are other organisations doing, thought leadership, and future talent acquisition models. So there's 6-7 headings there that I would be trying to break down, again, depending upon your target audience and given some specific data.
Someone's asked about localized data from a Scotland point of view. What I would be doing is I'd speak to your local rep about what they can give you, because they may be able to dissect the data that they've got into regions and give you local regionalized data rather than the data they put out, which is national data. They should be able to give you the localized data spot that's going on, if you speak to them from there.
Yeah, and if not, Liz, speak to EMSI. Need a contact, then shout. They have got some very, very good regional data.
So when EMSI, MC data is first class.
So once we start talking about, we now know our client base, who we're talking to from our current client base. We know our new client base, how we're targeting that. We know what our competitors are doing. Then we've talked about how we sort of make sure that our clients are on that journey that we talked about right at the beginning, that advocate journey, and what's going on. How do we get that client to the advocate journey? Talk to us a little bit more, Paul, about, you said that's one of the big things that you've done in the last 2 years. Talk to me about how you took clients from that initial contact to that advocate journey and what you put in plan in your business development plan to ensure all your consultants were actually following that strategy.
Okay, cool. So I was just answering another question there, just in terms of the breakdown. So I missed to start your question. I wasn't concentrating. Talk about not being able to multitask.
I wasn't going to mention multitasking there to you, Paul, but I was going to say we've talked about quite a lot about what our clients are currently doing, who the clients we should be squeezing, who the new clients we should be focusing at. We've talked about our competition and what we should know about our competition to try and beat our competition, and therefore look at what clients they're dealing with. But we talked about taking that client from contact to trusted to advocate. Now, when we start to sort of go through that process, again, we should start looking at our own client base. Where are we on that journey with them? They should be thinking about that with their clients, but also we should be thinking about how do we actually make those steps part of our strategy and how do we deliver that? So I was asking about what you've done over the last 2 years to make sure that happens in your past employment.
Yeah, so I think there's two parts to this question. I think there's, going back to the 5 key stages which you showed earlier, I think there's a piece of work around mapping where your current clients are on those 5 key stages and understanding if there is a plan, and each consultant should have a plan in terms of how they're going to move the client relationship forward. Now, what I would just ask is, what I would just suggest is that you've got to understand that to move a client relationship forward can sometimes take a massive amount of investment from a time perspective. And if that time is not aligned to the opportunity and an increase in margin or market share, then you may actually prefer to just keep your relationship at the contact stage or the acceptance stage. You're probably not doing business, by the way, if you're still at contact stage, but acceptance you probably will. So the effort has got to be matched with the return, and that's really important. And I think, what I would, what I don't think many people do, a lot of people will measure KPIs and ratios by consultant. They may not necessarily measure customer by ratio. And so I would be starting to look at your customers, and you can get your consultants to do this, and starting to understand how each customer performs, and how many CVs you send into that customer to get an interview, how many interviews do you need to get an offer, how many offers get through to placement. And then when you sat in front of your customers, you can then start to give them some benchmark and just say, actually, we send you, 3 CVs to get 1 interview. That's actually upper quartile performance. So we obviously, understand you exceptionally well. Conversely, if you're sending 10 interviews forward to get one interview, then it's about demonstrating and educating the client that in the local market, that's out of sync with your other clients and what other competitors are doing. So it's therefore opening that debate up around how the account is performing and how to get that account better. But I think somebody's just asked me a question on the Boston Matrix, Howard. I think it's related. It all comes back to understanding what the opportunity is with your client and how much time you're going to invest in that relationship match with what the potential return is. And if you're doing business with clients, and I use the example, which is a real life example, investment banking client in the middle of Canary Wharf, 2-3 years ago, 52 CVs to make 1 placement. That was the absolute ratio. So the plan was to move away from that client and give me 6 months to backfill it with other new clients, because I knew there were clients out there that you'd have to put less effort and time into to make the same amount of profit. So it's understanding how profitable your clients are and what the time and effort is that's going into those. And you don't have to service every client. Your clients where you're getting exclusivity, you've got that advocacy type relationship, they're coming to you as the first point of contact. Those are the clients that you want to invest in. Anything transactional where you just get a vacancy through a portal and margins are just being eroded year on year, those are not the relationships that you probably want to invest in.
I think the question there that was asked on the Boston Matrix, are we going to explain it? Then very simply to explain it, if you look at the star is that high performing growth market strategy, and where you need heavy investment to actually sustain that growth and grow that growth. You then obviously got your cash cow, which is high market share, high market value, usually mature clients that are successful in there that you're trying to develop and stuff like that. They need to be managed for continued profit and to make sure you're actually making profit, because obviously what a lot of big cash cows is, a star becomes a cash cow, and then what you need to do is manage that cash cow, because sometimes the cash cow will then start to erode its margin and erode its fee. Your question mark, they are clients that are low market share. Do they have the potential for high growth or not? Do they have the potential to really build their market or not? Have they the potential to become a star or become a cash cow? Or are you just wasting your time and looking at that? And then, unsurprising, we've used the term dog, or the Boston Matrix used the term dog, and they're products that have low market share, really unattractive sort of clients, and therefore they might only make 1 or 2 placements a year, if that. So again, are you wasting time on a client that's an actual dog rather than actually looking at clients that could be a star or a cash cow? Are you developing your question mark so you can actually identify which of those clients are which and moving from there? And that sort of moves to the sort of last question that we really sort of want to cover, is when we start to target, and a lot of people are asking at the moment, how do we target clients? What do we, as consultants, what are we targeting on at the moment? Dave, what would be your answer to that, on what would we be targeting our consultants on at this moment to make sure that we are getting our growth phase?
Well, I mean, I guess it's quite a simple, easy way to say is engagement, is meetings, it's engagement with clients, it's consultants being able to demonstrate that they know what's going on at their customer site. And there was a little technique that we used to use called a Judo Flip. And I may have mentioned this before, so apologies if I had, but you write down every single thing that you always have done in terms of a client relationship or a candidate relationship. You write down everything that you do, everything that your company does. And then on the flip side of that, you write down the polar opposite of what you could do. So everything that you do, write it down on the left-hand side of the page. On the right-hand side, write down the polar opposite of what you could do. In that list of things, you may have 20 things. Within that list of things on the hand side, there'll be a little nugget of something that you can do that can build engagement, that can build trust, that can cement the relationship a little bit more. And I would actually take that as an action. There's lots of things like the Boston Matrix. There are lots and lots of management tools that are out there. Jack Welch, the great guy who ran GE, said strategy is actually very, very straightforward. Pick a direction and implement like hell. And that's kind of my message to people today. Decide where you're going to go. Choose the KPIs you're going to measure for your business, for your people right at their desk, and then get going. Whatever it is, just get going. Get moving, and the more you move, the more enthusiastic you'll get about it, the more you'll realize that there is a way out of this.
Paul, I mean, you've been in this situation as I have. You know, targeting consultants. How would you normally target a consultant, especially in this type of market, to A, keep them motivated, and B, keep their eyes on the vision and the road ahead?
I think it's two things. I think it's been really clear what the minimum expectations are and standards. I think you know most people look for that, billing 10 grand a month, so 120 grand a year, regardless of what market you're in. I think it's about understanding people's activity levels, and you can't do this with your really experienced people. They'll just tell you to go away. Obviously, I'd use a stronger word than that if I wasn't being on a live webinar, which is why I like the thought and the technique around breaking a client activity down. So your experienced consultants won't feel quite as threatened, or that you're questioning what they're about, if you break the ratios down and your performance ratios by individual. But the second bit as well, we talked about sort of client retention. I'd equally be targeting the consultants on client retention. So a lot of agencies out there in the smaller space will not have, the recurring revenue, or the spot business, high margins, and all the rest of it. If you're not retaining, well north of 60% of your clients each year, then I would want to understand why. And I'd want to understand, what we could do better to retain a higher proportion of clients moving forward. You'll never get 100% because, clients will fold, move away, move into different markets or whatever. But, you should be, well north of 60%. If you're not well north of 60%, then, that for me would open up the dialogue and the conversation with the consultant around what can we do better to make sure that we're retaining. And if you're retaining more and more of your clients, then it makes it less onerous in terms of bringing new ones on board. But the new ones are then, the icing on the cake. It's all about trying to retain your existing ones and grow market share where you can.
I think you're right. I've always sort of looked at that individual basis and saying, how many jobs do you need to maybe hit that 10K? How many jobs do you need to hit your actual target? And then look at CVs to job interviews, et cetera, and then you can then start to look at that. If you boil that down and create your data by per consultant and then per client, then you can start to target people. You understand how many client calls they need to be making, how many client calls they need to be converting into that. If they can't get that from their current buying clients and from their potential lapsed clients, then you have to start to focus on that new business. And I think there also has to be an element that says they must focus on new business, because we go back to that what if question. What if this happened? What if that happened? To make sure that if you have the what ifs, you've covered the what ifs. So when you target them, you target on those things. I tended this time never to really target people too much on what their financial return is going to be. Why? Because sometimes it's very hard and they're not really in that control of that. It's what they're in control of is what you'd be targeting on, and they're in control in their activity levels, and that's what they can control. Once you can control the activity levels, then you can start to focus on, are they looking in the right place or not? Once they start to look in the right place, then you can maybe start bringing more financial targets based into it. But in the first place, I'd be looking at that. And as we start to sort of bring this to a close, there's a couple of things about, the data not particularly being right for certain areas. And maybe sometimes it is right. The data isn't right for an area. But if you took the national data and said, this is the national data for the UK, and then you drilled into your database, and you then able to extract data out of your database, then you could do comparisons between this is what the UK market's doing, this is what our local market's doing. And again, that adds massive credence to your client because you're talking about actual data of what's going on. And there's been a question here about next year. We're planning next year's budgets. And when do we think the perm placements in particularly will start to come back into the marketplace? And there's a bit of a crystal ball. I think all of us are gazing at there. My view is that the temp market will come back very, very quickly. And if you start to look at the actual stats from the REC and from other people that what have actually come back, the perm market came back very strong with the temp market up until this month, and then the perm market's dropped away while the temp market still started to grow. What I'd probably say is that, midpoint next year, fingers crossed, if nothing else changes, we should be in a reasonable position to say both markets should be absolutely moving. I wouldn't take my foot off the accelerator pedal on perm. I would carry on the accelerator pedal, and I'd be trying to drive it through the floor. Yeah. Guys, any last quick tips or anything before as we close this session off?
I was just going to say, with the news of the vaccine will come confidence. With confidence comes more permanent placements. So to your point, Aids, don't take your foot off the pedal. In fact, you should now be increasing it because we are now turning the corner. And as we turn the corner, we know that recruitment is the first to benefit.
Paul?
100%, couldn't agree more. I think for me, Howard, it's just these next 6 weeks are pivotal to any business owner's success for 2021. You take the foot off the gas now and it'll be your own expense next year. So next 6 weeks, absolutely smash all the things we've said. We've got some other great tips coming up over the next sort of 3 weeks, sharing more information about business development. But these next 6 weeks for me are critical, 100%.
I think the big question or the big answer to that one is very simple, is that before where consultants had the excuse, well, I can't get hold of my clients, they're on Christmas parties. I can't get hold of my clients, they're out having a Christmas drink. I can't have a gold, well, let me guess, there isn't any Christmas parties this year. There's going to be very few Christmas drinks this year, etc. Unfortunately. So your clients are going to be there for you to talk to. Your clients are going to be there for you to develop. And I always thought, to me, this was the most critical 6 weeks of the year. This is me getting ready for 2021. This is me getting ready to hit that accelerator pedal, because I'm already going at 100 miles an hour when I enter 2021 and accelerate away from my competition even quicker and further. And as you said, Paul, we're right. Next week, we're going to talk about lots of different things. Next week, we're going to talk about, do you know what your employers are actually buying? And are you geared up to deliver and support the services that meet and exceed their desires and expectations? And it's an interesting question. Do you know what what employers are actually buying at the moment? And once we understand what they're buying, then we can start to match what we sell to them, and then we can start to exceed their desires and expectations. So again, it's going to be a very, very interesting sort of conversation next week. So as you've already joined this week, okay, obviously your link still carries on for next week. For those who haven't already booked in, we are all offering still 1 hour free consultation. If you want to speak to us about pulling a marketing strategy together, then come and have a chat about putting that marketing strategy together to go to your candidates and to your clients. We are Jump Advisory Group. Our sole aim is to ensure that the recruitment market thrives, not just survives in 2021, and that all of you are in that thrive mode, not that survive mode. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Dave and Paul, once again, thank you for your time. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, everyone. Have a good week.